We had a tough loss against the top seed Grandmaster yesterday, but today's a new day, and we came ready to battle. This time, another tough game against a fellow international master from Italy. Now, he plays the fianchetto variation against the King's Indian defense, which is a very solid system that gives us a small advantage, a small but solid advantage. And I knew he was going to play this, so I prepared a sideline, which is not very common, to surprise him. And that sideline is with bishop f5 here. And the point is, we stop e4 with the bishop. And not only that, but if he plays a move like rook e1 to try and push e4, then we can jump in with knight e4. And actually, as soon as this happens, we're quite close to equalizing already. Like if he takes here, this completely neutralizes his bishop. Exchanges are good for us as well because we've got a bit less space. Now, he reacted very well after bishop f5. He played knight g5, taking control of e4. And here I play e5, and he pushes the pawn forwards with d5, taking space. And now the move I prepared, top engine move, is a5. The point is to take space here, and at some point this knight might come into c5, either via a6 or d7, and it just means that he can't play b4 to kick the knight, so it secures my outpost here. He had a bit of a think here, and then he played e4, which I had looked at, and the best place to retreat the bishop to is actually c8 here, because if we retreat to d7 and he takes, this bishop is blocking the queen, and it means I have to take the bishop, and I end up with a really bad backwards pawn. So by going all the way back to c8, now if he takes, I can just recapture the pawn, and this gives me a very nice structure, no weaknesses. Here he had a think and he played f3, which I hadn't looked at, and I knew it wasn't the top engine moves. So I figured there should be a dynamic way for me to play this, or at least a good way for me to handle this situation. And I saw I could play b5 here, which is a good move because it takes advantage of the fact that he's opened up this diagonal. So the point of f3 is to control these squares, limit my knight. But the downside is, in this one moment, I can use this tactic to push. So after takes, he can't play knight takes because queen b6 check forks. He plays bishop e3, and now I need to defend the pawn. And this is where I played a very natural move relatively quickly, but picked the wrong setup. I played bishop a6, which is very natural. Like the bishop just looks great here. But the problem is, this rook is gonna come to the c file anyway. So, like, threatening the rook doesn't help. But more importantly, he's gonna put the bishop on f1, and the trade of bishops is not good for me. How I should play is I should put the bishop on d7, because the other thing that the bishop does on d7 is it eyes this a4 square, which, even though it's one square compared to this long diagonal, it actually turns out to be a super important square, because when I push b4, this knight is going to jump to a4. And once the knight gets to a4, it controls this c5 outpost we were talking about. So yeah, I went slightly wrong here with bishop a6. Rook f2, great move, preparing the rook swing onto this file. I'm never going to be able to win the battle on the c file because I just don't have enough space to organize. But my plan was to stick something on c5. If I can secure this outpost, then I'm happy. So I started with knight bd7. Potentially, one other option here would be knight fd7, with the point being that after bishop f1, b4, now if he takes, I can take with the knight, and now I've secured the outpost. But here he doesn't need to trade here and help me develop the knight. Here he can play an interesting move, knight b5. And then this knight is kind of awkward because it's blocked in by my own pieces. So knight bd7. My idea is this kind of vacates this square as well. So now after bishop f1, I have queen b8. But now he locked onto the right plan, which I was worried about. He plays queen b3, and the point is he's gonna force me to push this pawn, and then the knight jumps into a4, and it stops me from going knight c5. Here I had an opportunity. So I played this sort of natural move, but here I had an opportunity to sacrifice the pawn, and I didn't consider this properly at all. I definitely should have, because I know the idea that if I can trade off his bishop, this bishop, I often get compensation, and it's probably worth a pawn or close to worth a pawn. The point is, after he takes, I play knight c5, and he has to take me in order to keep this guy defended. And now I get a favorable trade, which means this bishop is going to be very active. But also I don't have the kind of c file screwing me over, because I've got my rook on c5 now. Like it's quite a dynamically balanced game. I'm a pawn down, but there's decent compensation here. Take. Yeah, I would have been happy here because bishop h6 is coming as well, and this knight is kind of out of play. Okay, I missed that opportunity, and I played quite quickly with b4. Time management is such a tricky thing because I'm pushing myself to play faster, but it means I'm missing some of those moves. I'm probably going to play some more blitz games for my training. He takes, which is a great move, because now after rook takes, like my rooks are, this rook's kind of discoordinated, that I can't connect the rooks and fight for the c-file. It makes it even harder. I had a think here if I could take on c3, which would have been very interesting. The point is we trade pieces, and this bishop's still hanging. But what I figured is, if he just retreats the bishop, I still end up with a bad position. Because I was trying to calculate. First, I was thinking he plays bishop to b7, and then trying to win the exchange. But I have this move a4, and now this is pinned. And if he's not careful, if he plays knight c5, he can even end up losing the bishop. So he has to play queen b5, and now I sacrifice the exchange for this bishop, because that's the important bishop. And if he takes me, again, this bishop comes into game, and I'm quite happy. But I also saw he doesn't have to take me. He can just leave the option of taking me, and it's really awkward for me to sort out this situation here. I'm probably going to lose this pawn, but I don't dare to take him because it brings his rook in with tempo. So I didn't go for that. I recaptured on a6. Knight jumps into a4, and rook comes to c8, and he plays this rook to c2, which is the right rook, because if I trade, his queen has the thumb. And now, like, I felt like I was just about holding together with a knight c5 move, but it was very close. I come back with the bishop to try and overprotect c5. I'm preparing knight c5. And now he plays rook c6, taking advantage of the fact that if this pawn moves, he messes me up on f7. So I can't take him here, because after he takes, now it's a double attack because of the opening of this diagonal. So I play queen b7, and he brings the other rook, and now knight c5. And it looked like it was just about holding together. But the computer has a great way of playing it, which is, well, first of all, if he just takes and takes, here I'm sort of surviving now, because I've blocked up this c-file. I can try and blockade. I think he still has an advantage because this is a bad bishop, but it's potentially survivable. What I was looking at even more was here if he plays d6 with the idea of checkmating me. But here actually d6 would be a big mistake because I defend and he actually loses this pawn. So the trade of these pawns is really bad. So a position like this here, now I've got rid of his big pawn and I'm about to have huge counterplay. He's actually in trouble. He's probably losing here. But he doesn't have to play d6. The other way of capturing is capture with the bishop. And now, yeah, which is the game actually. So, but the way the computer plays this is really instructive. He takes on c8, queen takes, and yeah, he just plays this position that I mentioned, which is bad because of my bad bishop. He trades off the bishop actually and keeps the knight. Okay, so in the game he played bishop takes, and here was an important choice for me. I can recapture the bishop, or I can be sneaky and take the rook. And here actually I saw I could take the rook. It looks like it loses a piece, but there's a tactic. So here I'm a piece down, but I've got this pin. And if he tries to hang on to the piece with bishop e3, takes, I've got a fork against the bishop and the knight. Because if this knight retreats, I play queen c8, and now this fork is gonna get me back my piece. But what I saw is in this position, he can take on f7, and we end up in this endgame, which is okay for me, but I don't think I can win this. And I think I was too greedy, I was too ambitious here. And I kind of just, by process of elimination, I went for the other choice without calculating the other choice properly. So I chose d takes, not wanting to go into the ending. The problem is this is even worse for me. He took with the rook, and now I take on c6. Yeah, here he can actually take on c8 first and play this position against the bad bishop. But he took with the rook. Now I have to take this. And actually after rook takes here, I played h6 and we both missed a big tactic. Now the line that I looked at was he takes on f6 and then I take on g5. Potentially I could do a check first. And this looked okay for me, which my assessment was correct. Because even though I'm a pawn down, I'm going to get counterplay now that I've taken over the file. There's a funny line here where if you play d6 to try and open this up, I go king g7 and the rook gets trapped. So I was having all sorts of fantasies about reaching this position. But then he played queen c4, which is a good move. Now, the reason it gets an X is because we both miss a great tactic here. Knight takes f7. And the point is, I have to take with my king because the queen's defending the rook. And then he does queen c4. And here, I can't take him anymore because this is now a check. And I lose my queen. And if I don't take him, this rook's gonna mess me up. So knight takes f7 would have been winning. So I completely missed that. He missed it too. But yeah, I need to push myself to calculate more in these positions. Because actually the other move I could play here is knight e8, which kind of holds the position together. I'm a pawn down, but it gives me a blockade. And I have very reasonable drawing chances in this position. So h6, he misses the immediate win, but queen c4 is still a great move because now I can't do anything. I probably need to take this because otherwise he's coming in. and then he gets this huge pass pawn. Queen a7 check, moves the king, and now I can't take because he just pushes the pawn through and makes a queen. So I have to blockade. And here I did something really stupid. So I was planning knight e8, and I was looking like his knight retreats, and now I have a blockade. And I was trying to figure out how to handle this position. And what I realized was his position is tough. It is very tough because I don't have any activity, and he just brings the knight round. And once he brings the knight round, I'm in trouble. I did also think here if knight e6 was possible, interestingly. But I think I can take and queen f7 and just about hold together. So then I got hit by an epiphany, which is that instead of blockading with my knight, let's use the knight to come and capture the pawn. So I had this genius idea. I thought it was genius at the time, which is I'll play bishop to d6. I'll stop the pawn with the bishop, and then I'll play king g7. And now my knight is coming around like this. So if something like this happens, now all of a sudden I'm gonna win the pawn, and we're happy. But yeah, that was wishful thinking, because after bishop d6, he just plays this move, and I even saw this move in the other line, but just in the sort of time rush, I just completely forgot he could play it after bishop d6 as well. I think it was just a very difficult situation, and I need to be a bit more resilient in these difficult situations. Because after this, it's almost game over already. I can't take because of queen takes, forking the king and the bishop, and then this pawn comes through as well. So okay, I retreat the knight, but now this knight, instead of having to go the long way around like this, it's taken 2 moves. It's to get to c5 instead of 4. Knight c7, and he plays a solid move here, king f1. And the thing is, he just improves his king slightly, and there's nothing I can do. Like my pieces can't move, and there's no counterplay. So one plan he can do actually is just run the king over to this side where it's kind of safer, and then start doing stuff. So rather than die a slow death, I tried to create some opportunities here. I played king f8. And the idea is to try and bring the king in to the defense, because if I don't, he's just going to kill me slowly. He plays knight b7, and now king d7, trying to use the king. But here he just calculates well, and it's not difficult to find this win. Like what I was hoping for is check and queen takes c6. And here it's attacking the knight. And if he plays b3, all of a sudden my queen comes in and I have counterplay. But the problem is, after queen takes c6, he's got queen f8 check. And my king has to go to either d7 or e6. And his knight jumps in and check, and I have to give up the queen. This dumbass knight is blocking my king. So yeah, it's pretty much game over that I can't take that pawn. I tried to check and take with the king. He takes, I run with the king. And here he shows good technique. He just plays king d6. I can't take this because check, forcing the knight here to block the king, and then check is going to be checkmate. Yeah, so okay, I played queen b7 just with a last-ditch hope that he takes my pawn, and then I can take the knight. But he doesn't need to take the pawn. He just plays b3. and it's completely game over. My king is about to get mated. Yeah, tough loss, guys. Really, really, really tough. Credit to my opponent. He played well. But I need to play better. I know I can play much better than this. See you in the next one.